Hi everybody, I'm Corey Huffman. I teach 5th grade at Scribner Middle School in New Albany. Um, the way that I run my classroom with social studies because, well, obviously our corporation has put a huge focus on language arts and math, which leaves us. I'm lucky if I get to social studies twice a week. So my goal is to get to it at least twice a week for a good 45 minutes. That's not always the case, but for the most part, I mean that's what we try to do. But the way that I like to run my social studies classroom is when the students come in, I like to have a warm up question on the board, which is an essential question for that particular lesson for the corresponding unit. So what they do is the kids filter in and they've got a notebook, a journal, a social studies notebook that they keep their notes in or write these questions. And after they come in, they sit down, the question's on the board or it's on the overhead, and they read the question, they jot it down, and then they make a prediction as to what for instance, the unit that I did is over the Revolutionary War, and the main essential question for that unit is, why do people take risks? So before we started that unit, that was up on the board. Why do people take risks? And of course, the kids come in and they draw from their own life at the beginning, like, why would I take a risk, or why do people I know take risks? And so they make that prediction, and then and they keep that at the top of their page for that particular unit, and then below that there'll be a essential question for the first lesson that we're working on. So they'll make their prediction, and I give them 5 minutes or so to write that down, get their answer down, and then I call in volunteers for kids that want to read their response. And some kids, after the first unit or two, they get it. They start to try to make a prediction to the social studies curriculum. Okay, what's this question have to do with social studies? And they try to draw from that. Other kids like to take that question and put it to their own life, and either way is fine. So I take the volunteers and we share, and conversation stems from anywhere from 5 minutes, depending on what the question is, to 10. I try to cut it off at 10 minutes to to jump in what we do next. So the next thing I do after they've got their prediction down is I will introduce the vocabulary words for that particular lesson, and they've got a pre-made sheet. I give them a sheet that's got all the words on it, and if they are responsible enough to keep it, they fill in the vocabulary words as we go. But anyway, for each lesson there's usually no more than 5 words, sometimes 2. But we look at those words, we talk about them, we open up our textbooks and we find them in the corresponding lesson and try to gain, okay, this is what that means. Okay, I've seen that used in a sentence now. I get it. And some of the words the kids already know. But for the most part, I don't use the text a lot. So after we get those vocabulary words done and written in, I have gone through the text and taken each lesson and made a PowerPoint presentation, which I would love to have shown you today. However, all of my PowerPoints are at school, saved on my computer, which is being moved rooms, and I can't access it. So I apologize for that. But I'll describe to you my PowerPoints are they're nothing. They're not. I mean, each slide has maybe 2 or 3 vital points of information, usually open-ended. They're written in open-ended questions to get the kids thinking. And I put a lot of pictures on there that correspond with whatever we're studying, so the kids have a visual to look at. But the way that I do my PowerPoints is, I put the slide up there, and we talk about what the kids are jotting stuff down, and I'll talk about what everything up there means or what it goes with, and kind of formulate a story of my own that goes along with whatever we're studying, instead of just I never wanted to get into that routine of, all right, kids, come in, open up your books to page 171, we're going to start reading. I didn't like to do that in school, and I can't imagine that kids today would like to do that in school. So I try to keep it interesting by doing my own version of the book through PowerPoint pictures and whatnot. But for my students I have two groups of students. I should explain that at the beginning. But I have an honors English group, and then I have a tier 2 group. So with the honors English group, or with the honors group actually, I don't give them any kind of I don't help them out a lot. Like, for instance, my tier 2 group, I give them the vocabulary sheet with most of the definition filled in already, where they just have to jot down a couple of the words, and on their notes, like with the tier 2 group, I give them closed notes, which is basically an entire outline of whatever we're going to talk about with a few words missing here and there, so as they go along, instead of writing out the sentence or the full question, they're just jotting down a couple words, which helps them get it done quicker, and then they're able to pay attention. But some of the kids in my honors group, they have the option to, because I explained to them that when I was in school, I had a very difficult time writing notes and listening to what the teacher was saying. I couldn't do both. So if I was writing stuff down, I wasn't catching a lot of what the teacher was saying. And I told kids, there may be some of you like that. You may not want to admit it or not, but you may have written something down. All of a sudden, you realize, I don't know what he just said. So I give them the option, if they don't want to take notes, they don't have to, but they have to follow along in the book, because my PowerPoints correspond with the book. So, you can follow along in the book and you're still up to speed. So not all the kids do that. There's just a couple of them that do that, and I talk to their parents to make sure they're okay with it, because we want to make sure that they stay on top with their grades. So if their grades start slipping, then I want to make sure that they're writing stuff down, so then they're going home and mom and dad know, okay, this is what you talked about, this is what's going to be on your unit quiz or your unit test or whatever. So that's one way that I can talk to parents and make sure that they're on top of things too. So with my slides, I'll have I really wish I could show you, but I have, I'll put a couple pictures, and there's usually, one of the vocab words that we've already got and we've already written down, we're just reiterating it, and then there's usually a statement that kind of sums up whatever I want to say, specifically, that main important point, and then there's usually like an open-ended question on the slide that can get the kids, instead of just sitting there like zombies and writing everything I'm saying, that kind of gets them to interact with me, so I know that they're paying attention and we can have conversation, because I like an interactive classroom where the kids are participating, they're into it, they're asking questions, they're trying to get a feel for what we're talking about. So one of the examples, so for instance, let's just say we're talking about the French and Indian War, and that PowerPoint's up there. So one of the questions that might pop up on one of my slides might be something like, from the time that the Pilgrims arrived, which we'd studied a couple units back, to now, how has the relationship, the English colonist relationship with Native Americans, how has it changed over that 50 to 80 years? How's it changed? And kids think back, and we start talking about, okay, well, we used to get along. Now all of a sudden we're fighting. We're taking land, and it keeps them. They interact. They interact, and a lot of the times, and I've been lucky enough with the kids I have, that instead of telling it to me, they will make a point, and then another classmate will build off that point, or interject that point, where we have like a debate or something like that go on in the classroom. So I appreciate those open-ended questions, and I think it allows the kids to be, more vocal in class, and I like that. But anyway, after the PowerPoint, which is usually no more than 10 slides per lesson, we take what we've got, and then we go back. We go back to that first warm-up question that we had, and we take what we learned for that day, and now we apply that to that question. So all of a sudden, that warm-up question at the beginning, where we may not have understood what was going on, or we just maybe had to draw from our own life, now we can use the information that we gained from that lesson and put it towards that question, and get an answer, and we jot that down in our journals, because that's, and at Scribner, one of the big things that we want to do is we take those essential questions. What do we want the kids to know? And that's what we teach around. So having those essential questions helps me in my classroom, because I know, okay, this is what I want them to know by the end of the day, and that's what we do. So, and another thing I like to do is after they've got that down, after they've taken down their, they've written down their new response in their notebook. I like to end the lesson. I like to end my lessons with questions like, does anybody have anything else they'd like to share that's on top of what we just talked about? Something, because these kids, they're reading informational books, they're reading stuff outside of class, and something that they read may have to do with what we're actually talking about that I didn't talk about, and it's usually maybe one or two, if that. But those kids will raise their hand. They'll tell us what they read or what they learned about from an outside source, and so we gain that, which is nice. And then one of the other things I like to do is I ask the kids, based on what we just talked about, was there anything that you still have questions about? Is there anything you want to know more about? And every once in a while there'll be those kids that raise their hands and they'll ask a question, and most of the time I know the answer. We look up the answer and we enrich that lesson with those answers. Sometimes though the kids will ask me something and I don't even know the answer. So what I do with that then is I tell them, okay, that's a phenomenal question. I'll write it down on the board and I'll say, look, I don't know the answer. The first three of you that take the time outside of class, look this answer up, write it down, and bring it to me the next day, I'll give you 5 bonus points in social studies. And that's kind of one of those things that the kids are always looking for questions to ask that maybe I don't know, so they can get those extra points. So, and that's how I run my social studies class, two times a week, and usually it takes us about anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks to get through a unit. And at the end of the unit, we have they love Jeopardy review games, so we'll do a Jeopardy review game and split them up into teams, and then I give them an outline of their notes that they've already taken, and then they will study that and they'll have their unit tests. So that's how I run social studies. I like the way I do things. If I could improve on one thing, I would like to work in more informational text from social studies into my ELA curriculum, and start crossing it up like that, and to reinforce or to help those kids that may not get it that first time, or maybe have more questions, to show them that there's other ways aside from your social studies book or just from those PowerPoints to go and look that information up. So thank you for listening. I hope you guys have a great rest of the summer, and good luck when school starts.